see the player first. And a woman that loves to look at fashion and paintings and pretty faces is supposed to see the face first.
I think that's a good prediction, and the reason why I think that's a good prediction is that another thing that we know is that when people are looking at various stimuli, their interpretations and what they notice and what they pay attention to and so forth is framed and kind of shaped by their background. So if they have particular interest or particular biases, that's certainly going to influence what they perceive. Okay, there's a phenomenon related to ambiguous figures that I want to mention, and it's called binocular rivalry. But before I do that, I need to give you some background. I mentioned earlier that normally your brain fuses the two images together, the image from your right eye and the image from your left eye, to get depth. Well, normally your brain can do this because the two images are highly similar. Usually what the left eye sees is pretty similar to what the right eye sees, but it's not identical. There are differences. Okay. There's a really easy way to demonstrate this. Hold out your arm with your thumb up and close one eye. Okay. Line up your thumb with something on the other side of the ring.
You're on the other
side. Most of it's me. Okay, now that your thumb is lined up, close the eye that's open and open the eye that's closed.
Yeah.
Is your thumb still lined up?
No.
It's not. This is because each eye gets a slightly different view of the world.
Yes.
Why do the eyes get slightly different views? Well, they're not in the same place.
And you have a dominant eye usually too. I have a left eye dominance, for example.
Usually, but eye dominance per se isn't really kind of driving this as much as the spatial separation between the two eyes. Okay.
You know, in the Tao Te Ching, they say that what is not there is what is important. So like in the vase, it's with the pictures of the people, it's not there, but you say that it's there.
Yeah, I think I heard somebody say negative space, which, yeah, that's kind of a new age way of drawing. Okay, just to focus maybe not on the figure, but on the spaces between the figure, which where's Cindy when we need her? Good. Yeah, a couple of you look blank. She's always talking about the spaces in between. Okay. So anyway, normally the images that the eyes get, they're very similar. They've got the same kind of objects, and there's just a little bit of difference. Oh, by the way, typically the further away something is, the less difference there is between the left and the right eye image. So your brain can compare the two images, and if there's a lot of difference between them, the object's got to be close. Okay. If there's very little difference, the object is further away. So that's kind of the comparison that your brain does. But what if the images that each eye got were very different from each other? Okay, now we get to binocular rivalry. Here's a schematic of a typical experiment on binocular rivalry. And you can see there are two images. The left eye gets a green grading in one orientation, the right eye gets a red grading at a different orientation. Now typically, in these kind of studies, the observer wears goggles. It screens out everything except for the stimuli they're supposed to be seeing. So all they would see would be these two gradings, one to one eye, the other to the other eye. What do you think the percept would be? If one eye got a green grading and the other eye got a red grading. Most people guess there'd be some kind of planet going on. You'd get some sort of blending or some sort of fusion. Not what happens. What happens, and this plays a little closer to what John said a moment ago, is that you will see one of them. You see, like, for example, a left eye image. And then they'll flip and you'll see the right eye image. It's kind of like the Necker cube in this regard. And then they'll flip back to the left eye image. That's called binocular rivalry because binocular, you've got two eyes. And within your consciousness, there's a rivalry. What's going to be in your consciousness, the left eye image or the right eye image? They're basically duking it out and flipping back and forth. Now, if you have a dominant eye, the dominant eye one is going to predominate, but it's not going to be the only thing. Because the dominant eye is going to fatigue, and when it fatigues, the non-dominant eye slaps its percept in there. But again, think about, this is what the stimulus is actually like, but your sensation of it is nothing like that. There's a disconnect. Your conscious experience flips between the two. Yeah, just like with the Necker cube, there are changes in your conscious perception, even though the stimulus itself remains unchanging. Now we're gonna get really concrete.
Yeah, right.
Phantom limb syndrome. This used to be known as phantom limb pain. We're finished with the ambiguous stuff. It used to be phantom limb pain because the earliest reports and studies involve reports of pain. But other types of sensations have been found, though, so it's now known as phantom limb syndrome. We see this in victims of war or victims in accidents in which a limb has been lost. Now, even though the limb no longer exists, or if it exists, it's not attached to the body. Why is that funny?
That you thought to.
I had to add that.
Yeah, that you knew you might have that question.
Anyway, people still report sensations from the limb. So let's say a person lost his left arm below the elbow. That person might nonetheless report feeling of pain or other sensation in his left hand. Okay, the hand that doesn't exist, it's not connected to his body, not connected to his brain. Furthermore, these sensations, as I kind of just implied, are localized in space, in the area where the limb would have been located relative to the body if the limb was still there. You know, phantom limb syndrome shows us in a very clear way that sensations and subjective experience don't necessarily match objective reality. But nonetheless, it's a very interesting question. How can you have a sensation of a limb that isn't there? The view within the medical community, well, the majority view within the medical community, is that this sort of thing most probably reflects spontaneous activity in the nerve endings in the stump. And maybe a lack of cortical reorganization in the brain after the limb was lost. Which, by the way, this gives evidence that our experience is in the brain. It's not out in the limb or not out in the world for other kinds of objects. If we touch something hot with our hand, we don't subjectively feel the heat in our brain. We usually feel it in our hand. One of the most commonly reported phantom limb syndrome experiences is that a phantom hand is clenched, often painfully so. And there's a remarkable treatment that I'm going to talk about next that's been developed that seems to work in a lot of the patients. On the left side, you see a picture of the device. Now, the patient who's in this photograph has his right hand, and his left arm is amputated below the elbow. Okay. The right hand is inserted into a box, and through the use of mirrors, the visual perception is that both the left and the right hands are present in the box. And if you look at that picture, you can see there's a mirror image. It looks like there's a left hand there. Well, that's really just a mirror of the right. But if you're looking at it, it's like, okay, right hand, left hand. By moving and unclenching the right hand, which would of course cause analogous movements in the mirror image of the left hand, symptoms of the left hand clenching, the left phantom limb hand clenching, can be ameliorated. Purely visual information regarding a non-existent hand can influence both kinesthetic and proprioceptive sensations from that non-existent hand. That's remarkable.
It really is.
Again, that also shows you how the sensation sort of might be wrong because you've got the phantom limb in the beginning, but then you can also treat that by using a different type of sensation. In this case, having the person look in a mirror box.
And you can do that with all different limbs and...
I've only seen this discussed for hands and hand clenching. I don't know if it's been tried with people that have lost their legs. Yeah, I'll go ahead and say this. There are other sorts of phantom limb experiences too that are limited to males. I'm not sure if those have been treated using the mirror box.
Oh, I bet they haven't. Oh, God, I have to get up early on a Saturday and go see how that works out.
I don't know the statistics, but kind of the impression I have is that phantom limb is more common for hands and arms than it is for legs.
Well, it's the clenching. I'm wondering why they had the sensation of the tightly clenched to the point that it causes pain.
I don't know. I mean, that might be the spontaneous kind of actions of the nerve ending stuck in the stump. They're firing because they're confused with the kind of inputs they're getting. I don't know. So our expectations based on our past experience can influence current conscious experience. People have a lifetime of experience with their limbs. But if it's suddenly removed, they might have conscious experience of its continuation. Now I want to get really speculative about phantom limb. Okay. The medical community focuses on neural explanations, but there's another possibility, one that's particularly congruent with the ideas of ions, noetic science, morphic fields. Those of you familiar with Rupert Sheldrake's work will know that a morphic field is loosely akin to an energy pattern surrounding a body. So if we think in terms of a morphic field, phantom limb syndrome in humans is very similar to the phantom leaf effect in curling photography and other demonstrations of energy fields in the body. People know curling photography, or do I need to say about that? Say something about that.
What is it?
Okay. This was a huge rage in the 70s. A book came out called, I think, Psychic Discoveries Behind the Iron Curtain. The Russians were doing this kind of research where if they took, let's say a person's hand, they put their hand on undeveloped photographic film, and a slight electric current was passed through it. Okay. You would get different images surrounding the outline of their hand. It looked a lot like people said human auras looked like. So for a while people were thinking, oh, curling photography is a way to photograph the aura. Okay. And different experiments on this were done to where people's thoughts could influence these energy patterns. So for example, if you had two people each put fingers on this undeveloped film, the current was passed, and the film kind of developed. If they were two people thinking very kind, loving thoughts about each other, you could actually see what looked like an energy flow between the two fingertips. If these were two people thinking angry thoughts or who hated each other, like somebody wearing a Magna hat and a reasonable human being, you would, and I hadn't planned this next line when I made that other sarcastic comment, but this fits beautifully. You can see a wall. You can literally see an energy wall between the two fingertips.
And then somebody brings a hammer and a saw and takes care of that.
Yeah, if you're curious about this, you can Google Curlian photography. I'm sure you can find a lot of things on the internet.
Sounds a little bit like what you read in Celestine Prophecy too about that.
Haven't read it. One of the
It's about energy fields, though,
Okay.
and one of the theories about that pattern, it's not that it's remembered, but that it's still picking up, the
It's still
energy
picking
field
up, yeah.
is still there,
yeah.
even though the physical thing is gone.
Right. Now, the picture I have here is an example of what's called a phantom leaf effect. Now, if you put down a leaf, you get a Curlian image of the energy field kind of around the leaf. Okay? Let's see you take the leaf, rip off a section of it, put it back down. Take another Curlian image immediately after you rip off the top. You still see an energy pattern of what was there before. Now, what I would love to do, but there seems to be no way to actually do this or get it done, is take someone who has lost a limb, see if there's a Curlian pattern of their missing limb.
Well, nothing is lost, everything is transformed.
You've never seen my office.
It's still there. It's hiding.
If we think in terms of like a morphic field, phantom limb syndrome in humans is very similar to maybe phantom leaf effect in Curlian photography and other demonstrations of energy fields in the body. Phantom limb involves bodily sensations, and this is a good segue to the fifth and last problem, the nature of qualia. So we've been kind of looking at empirical evidence at this point, now we're going to get philosophical. That would have been a great parody of the Elizabeth Newton-John song. Let's get philosophical. So anyway, until now the problems have been relatively specific also. But the nature of qualia, this is a big general problem. Qualia is a plural term, by the way. The singular is quail. This is the term that philosophers and others use for sensory perceptual subjective experience. So the experience of red as red, blue is blue. These are instances of color qualia. Subjective experience of different colors, as well as saltiness, bitterness, hot and cold, the taste of chocolate. These are all examples of qualia. Current scientific understanding, or current scientific dogma, whichever of those you prefer, is that our experience reflects patterns of neural firing in the brain and the nervous system. Somehow, qualia arises from electrochemical activity in our nervous system. Okay. So you might have one pattern of activity that results in the perception of red, another pattern results in this perception of saltiness, another in a perception of the taste of an ice cream sundae smothered in hot chocolate and butterscotch. I'm seeing the wistful looks, yes. Okay. But we don't experience our neural activity as such. Instead, we perceive these subjective qualities, things like red, saltiness, heat, and so forth. So how is it the patterns of neural activity in the brain are translated into these conscious subjective experiences? In other words, how can patterns of electrical activity give rise to qualia? Now, a few years ago, at one of the earlier Tucson conferences on consciousness, Dave Chalmers, who at that time was a philosopher from California, he's since gone back to Australia, he called this question, with some understatement, the hard problem. Yeah, no kidding, Dave. But he did this in a sense to point out that within sort of the study of consciousness, we had kind of easy problems, which were problems that we in principle knew how to solve. Categorization, function of attention, basically how things worked, okay? But we still couldn't solve that basic explanatory gap between how these functions somehow gave us subjective experience. That was a hard problem. You might have noticed I tried to slip something in there. The idea how neural experience can create subjective experience. That phrasing involves an assumption that causality arises from the physical structure. Your consciousness arises from your brain, in other words. A lot of investigators talk that way. Others take what I think is a more appropriately cautious route. They'll talk about neural correlates of consciousness. From a noetic point of view, it's just as feasible, though, that the mind influences the brain as it is that the brain influences the mind. So all these caveats to the side, there are 4 kind of thought experiments or ruminations about qualia that philosophers and other scholars in consciousness studies have ruminated on. You see them listed here. There's what is it like to be a bat, the inverted spectrum, Murray the color scientist, and what Gay is looking forward to, the philosophical zombies and Zimbos. And yes, a Zimbo is a thing. What I'm going to do is describe kind of each of these. First, what is it like to be a bat? Well, not that. Boy, that got nothing.
I remember seeing that
Yeah.
when it was new.
That was just a couple of years ago.
Yeah.
The question of what it is like to be a bat was asked in a famous philosophy paper, I believe in the 70s. And the idea is, what would the subjective experience of navigating by radar be like? Because we know that's the way bats navigate. The argument suggests that since humans don't have a sensory organ that is sensitive to radar in that way, we really couldn't imagine what the experience would be like. We can have an intellectual understanding of how bat radar works, but it wouldn't really tell us what the subjective experience would be like.
Yeah, but we have people who lose a sense, develop, their other senses develop more. And I've heard of people who are blind who have developed some sort of echolocation.
Okay, for the sake of argument, I will grant that. There might be some blind humans that can echolocate.
Not as well as a bat, though, I don't think.
Well, true, I would think.
And how does that differ from a bat's experience?
Can bats have no visual ability at all?
No, I think they have visual ability, it's just very low. See, the point that the argument's trying to make is without that sort of subjective experience, we can't really imagine what it's like. We can have all this understanding at a sort of abstract conceptual level, but we wouldn't have the quality of the subjective experience that a bat would have.
Well, yes, when you consider how fast they will fly, and God knows where, and they don't automatically, until they bash into something.
Yeah. Okay, since you're not buying the bat, I'll give you a few other examples. Dolphins navigate by sonar. Birds are sensitive to the polarization of light. Dogs can hear higher auditory frequencies than humans. Cats, honeybees, and hummingbirds can see into the ultraviolet. Some fish and eels are sensitive to electromagnetic field gradients. I'll go with the bird example, polarization in light. Y'all probably know that light travels as a wave. Now that wave can go sort of up and down in this plane, or it can go side to side, or it can be at any sort of intervening angle. That's what's meant by polarization. So if you're wearing polarizing lenses, for example, what those lenses will do is filter out all but one orientation. This is the way polarized sunglasses work. They filter out light that's at all but one orientation. So they might let this orientation through, but not this orientation. Okay, now that you know what polarization is like, what would it be like to experience that? No idea. How would that change your visual experience? We can't even conceive how that would change our visual experience because we haven't had that experience.
Well, then how do we know that birds are sensitive to that?
Because in experimental studies, we have been able to develop devices that manipulate that, and we see the birds respond to that information. And in fact, it's now thought that that's one of the cues that they will use on long migratory paths. In order to make sure that they fly in the correct direction, they keep the polarization constant. So yeah, that's how we've learned a lot of these different things, is we have to build devices to test them out. Dog whistles, another good example. Dogs hear auditory frequencies. We don't. If you get a dog whistle and you blow it, you're not going to hear anything.
I had a dog that went nuts if I had an electric toothbrush. And you know, you couldn't hear it yourself. I could hear it in my head because it's
Bone conduction, yeah.
But nobody else would. But I had a dog that would run to another end of the house
Yeah, probably high frequencies.
because it was some frequency. Not all the dogs are like that, but this one was.
It's offensive hill.
Yeah. Yeah. Or if you're on a boat and there are a bunch of dolphins around, you're probably not hearing a lot of things. But if you could hear at around 60,000 or so hertz, which is where their navigation is, it would be a very loud cacophony. But our ears only go up to at best 20,000 hertz. So we don't hear a lot of the noise that's out there because we don't have the sensory capacity.
Okay, we are not going to experience it because we are not built to experience that, but we can
Yeah.
imagine it.
Yeah.
Our imagination has no limits. I can imagine, and I said this, and I was looked at by interlocutors like I was completely deranged. I was watching a bee getting inside this big, beautiful purple flower, and I saw myself in this incredible, huge, purple,
Bingo.
wonderful.
You saw
My
this.
imagination.
No. You imagined what it would be like
Yes.
as a human to experience that.
No, I saw
Not as a
myself as a
bee.
bee. I saw myself as a bee. I felt myself being a bee. Now, it's my
You felt
imagination.
yourself
Yes.
being a bee. A human self imagining a bee, not a bee as a bee.
Okay, of course, I cannot
Of
transform
course, okay.
myself into a bee, but the imagination can take you beyond. You can make it work for you. You are never going to be a bee. That's ridiculous.
I don't know, I might come back as a bee in my next life.
I would certainly agree that imagination can give you some
Yeah,
insight
because
into
a
these
bee
things.
cannot
But very
cannot-
different.
imagine, they cannot even imagine. You say, no,
Well,
Well, people
That's
have different
different.
degrees of
That's
imagination.
different. There was something I heard on the radio coming home, I only caught a very brief part of it in PR, but we were talking about an ear function where a guy has acute, whatever it was, kind of auditory, where he hears things much more acutely than most people do. And he said even people wrinkling paper just absolutely makes him just go crazy. He can't stand it, he has to leave. And I'm not sure how, if he could translate that for us, but I guess we can't.
Well, we could probably
I
get
can't
closer to
experience
that because, we've
Yeah,
got
at least
human
it's-
hearing, and we also know what it's like to be annoyed by sounds. So we can kind of come closer to that. But
It's
we
not the
don't,
same as the frequency.
we haven't built up a three-dimensional model of our surroundings by using sonar in our brain.
But when we have our mainline visual and auditory patterns, but then a lot of times blind people have been able to feel color.
Yeah.
Because they weren't able to see anymore, they depended on another process of picking up vibrations. They could
Which
tell
they were
this is
able to
ping
do
or
as
ring.
a human.
But again, they sensed
There
color
could be anything
through
that-
touch, okay, they could you know, hand over a fabric and say it's pink or that's green, but not because they could see it, because they could feel it. And most of us don't do that very often,
And we don't have to very often.
and we don't have to, but if, I mean, but there's some capacities to go beyond our usual channels when there's a deficiency in one of them.
Sure, and I would certainly agree that people, especially people who have lost a sense, are able to compensate in other ways. But that seems to be sort of categorically different, because you're taking a human body with human experience and extending that experience versus trying to imagine the experience of a body type
Yeah.
that you don't have.